Good morning. God bless you. We had a wonderful meeting last night.
Yes.
I think the presence of the Lord was here. I enjoyed it greatly. And David get David back to the room and put him back in there, and he's ready to go again this morning. It's just a real honor and a privilege to serve God. Excuse me, my voice is a little bit hoarse this morning, but that's all right. It's another one of those obstacles to overcome. I really don't know where to start when you come into a place for the first time and you've got so many years of what God's been doing in your life. It's kind of hard to, just pick out something and go for it. But I'll start, excuse me, a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of background. How many of you were here last night? Well, most of you here last night? Okay, good. We know a little bit about what's going on there. God called my husband and I to Mexico. It's been almost 25 years ago. But before that, when we were married, neither one of us were serving God. David was raised up in a Christian home. He was a pastor's son. And because of some disappointments in the church, he rebelled. And I'm sure some of you can understand that. But he had a lot of disappointments in church people and decided that he wasn't going to be a hypocrite. So he did quite the opposite. I think it would have been better for the world if he had been a hypocrite. But anyway, when I met him, he was at this point of rebellion in his life, and he was out in the world, and he was looking for someone that had not been raised in church. And that's why he chose me. I was a good person, but, good people go to hell too. And so that's where I was going. And we were married, and, I had this television dream that once you get married, life's happy ever after. Well, it wasn't that way. It was bad. He was running from God, and I was wanting a dream life, which wasn't there. And so things just started getting worse and worse. And one day I turned on the television, and Billy Graham was preaching to me. And before I got through listening to him, I gave my heart to the Lord. As far as my husband was concerned, that was the worst thing in the world that could have happened. And he was furious at me for about a year. And our life was very, very miserable for about a year before God got a hold of him and saved him. And during that time, I was pretty desperate. I had this other dream that if you get saved, everything's just going to be fine, and you just float all off to heaven. But it didn't happen that way. The first year I was saved was the worst year of my life. It was very, very rough, mainly because I wanted my husband to be excited and serve God too, and he didn't want that. He wanted to get away from it. He was trying to run from it, and if you try to get away from it, it makes it worse. And so anyway, I prayed, and David's mother had been praying all of his life, but I finally got desperate, and I said, God, look, you promised me in your word. I don't know a whole lot of it because I wasn't raised in the Bible, but I saw in there that you wouldn't put on me more than I could bear. And this seems like more than I can bear. So would you do something with my husband? Would you save him or maybe kill him or something? I was serious. I was serious because I thought, if God just took him away, then I'd be free. And I actually thought he wouldn't save him. I just really thought, well, we've tried everything, and everybody's tried to witness to him, and he's not gotten better, he's gotten worse, so, probably you're going to kill him instead of save him. And so he took a job up in Alaska back when they had that big oil find in Alaska, and he was going to fly up there, and I was sure he wasn't going to come back. I just thought, this is it, God's taking him, he's going to be gone forever. And he got on the plane, and guess who came in the plane? God. God came in there and spoke to him in an audible voice. David got down in the aisle, in the plane, and prayed a prayer of salvation all by himself, and called me when he got to the airport in Alaska and said, guess what? I gave my heart to Jesus and I'm saved. And he came back, and it was a different man. It really was. I mean, God, that old man left. David's been different ever since. And during that year, just give you a little background to tell you what I'm going here. During that year, when I told God, reminded him that he was putting on me more than I could bear, well, I made a promise to him. God, I really want my husband saved. I really want to serve you, but I want to serve you with him. And if you just save him, I'll go anywhere, do anything. You know how you make those promises. And I said, I'll serve him. I'll serve you. That's just what I want. And I was sincere in my heart, and I meant it. And so when David got saved, he immediately, he had the knowledge up here. He was brought up with the Bible. He knew it more than, that's why nobody could witness to him. He knew more than they did. And, but it wasn't in his heart, it was in his head. When he gave his heart to the Lord, God just moved it to his heart. And so he had already been to Bible training and Bible school, so he immediately started preaching. Within just a couple of months, he was pastoring a small church out in Cottonfield, and the church was just on fire, and then shortly after that, he received the baptism of the Holy Ghost. And God set him on fire. And I think it was a little bit too much for the American church, because they started encouraging him to go to mission field. And there was in his heart, too, there's a place down there in the jungle that you probably need to go. And so he made a trip down there with the missionary they introduced us to, and made a trip down there, and I don't know if I had an excitement or a fear that he was going to come back and say, well, God called me there, which, to me, some people don't believe this way, but to me, if you call David, you call me too. And so I figured he was going to come back and say, well, we're called to the jungle of Mexico. And I had seen some pictures, a couple had gone on the same trip and had a picture album. And to me, it was just as clear as if they had taken pictures with David in it. He was in every picture, although he wasn't. And I saw that, and I knew where we were going. And he started selling our furniture. When David got back, we didn't even have a bed, because I knew he was going to come back and say, pack up, we're leaving. And he did. And this was in September. He made the trip, and we were gone in December. We were gone to language school. We went to language school for 9 months. And because David was a pastor of a small church, we didn't have a big home church to send us out. It was God that sent us out. But then again, we didn't have a big check that was promised to us every month either. And my husband says, God told me to live by faith. And that was one of the things that God spoke to him on that airplane when he got saved. He said, David said, I don't know about this. He said, in your word, it says people live by faith and everything. He said, I see them living by their job. He said, I don't see anybody living by faith. And David was the man that could take a challenge. The guy said, well, why don't you do it? And so he agreed to it. He said, okay. So David told me, we're going to live by faith. And I had 2 small children. One was in my arms, and the other one was 4 years old. And I said, okay, fine, I guess. But, I wanted to show me the money. I wanted to see it. And David was just, he was so sure that God was going to do it. And during the time we were getting ready, in preparation, getting ready to leave between this September and December, and even a few months before that, God started teaching us things, how we could trust Him. We were going to a meeting one night. David had been invited, a couple of hours away to a meeting, and we were driving this old car that the gas needle was broken, and we'd gotten rid of our things that we owed debts on because, I guess we didn't have faith to pay the debt. But we thought that was an act of faith too, to get rid of those things and just take what God would give us at the time. And so we had this old car, and it ran out of gas on the way to the meeting, and neither one of us had a dime in our pocket. And so we're praying, and I'm thinking in my mind, what's he going to do now? And he gets out and walks around the car, and for what reason, I don't know, but he walked around the front of the car and bent over and picked up something. He brought it over and showed it to me, and it was a muddy, dirty $20 bill. It was just laying on the ground right in front of his car. And he knew, and I knew too, that that was God's provision. We went and paid for our gas, and at that time we had enough for our RC and the tree. And we went on our way. And little things like this began to happen. And, you know, David was confident that it would happen, but I had to see it. I had to learn to trust God. And I had to learn to trust my husband too. But God started teaching us these things, that how He was providing for us. And we went to Mexico, and everybody thought we'd be back less than a year. And I think some of them are still waiting for us to come back and say we didn't make it. But God has been faithful. I asked God during that time that we were preparing to go. I had questions in my mind. I had questions in my mind about raising my children there, about the finances for sure, how the food was going to be supplied, but also about raising my children. What about their education? What about, you know, all the things that a mother thinks of for their children? And He gave me two scriptures in the Bible. One of them is 2 Corinthians 12:9. And He said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee. I'll just cut it short right there because that's what spoke to my heart. God said His grace would be sufficient. I couldn't see me in the jungles of Mexico living. I thought at that time we were going to live in one of these, the people we work with now still live in stick houses with mud floors. Very few of them have electricity and running water. We're starting to get it in there. And I thought that's where I was going to live. And I thought, God, I grew up with an air conditioner and a dishwasher, a washer, dryer, all the conveniences, refrigerator, freezer. How am I going to do this? He said, my grace will be sufficient. I said, okay. I'm going to have to call on it because I know this is not going to be an easy thing. And then, of course, I wanted to know what about the food and what about all these things. And He showed me Philippians 4:19. But my God shall supply all your needs according to His riches and glory by Christ Jesus. And He has been so faithful all these years. He has supplied every need. When we went to Mexico, I didn't have to live in a stick house. We lived in the last house you could live in without a stick house, and it was a block house. To me, it was a mansion because I had in my mind living with a dirt floor, one-room hut. And this was a house that had rooms, it had a kitchen, it had running water, it had electricity, and so it was wonderful to me. And I thank God for that. And He brought us there, and we didn't know why. We went into an area that had no gospel, and that was exciting that we would be the first people there to tell people about Jesus. It was mainly going to be my husband telling them about Jesus. I was going to be tending to children, teaching them school, doing that sort of thing. But you go into an area, you're going to face demons that you've never faced before. And we weren't quite prepared for that. We just didn't know. We knew it was going to be more difficult. We knew it was going to be harder. We knew there would be a little bit more demonic activity, but we didn't know quite how much. And God showed me also when we started getting ready to go. I said, look, I can see my husband out preaching to the Indians. It's dangerous. No white man's ever been out there. The gospel's never been preached. But what about me? What do you want me to do? What is my part in it? He said, you will need to pray and fast for your husband's very life, for your family's life. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to pray and fast and seek me. And I didn't know a whole lot about prayer and fasting. And I didn't have Bible college. And I wasn't raised up in a church. And here we're going to the mission field. I said, but God, I don't know anything. And that's okay. If God's in your heart, He'll teach you what you need to know when you need to know it. And I felt so, I don't know what the word is for it. I just didn't feel ready. That God called us there, and it was time to go. And we went, and we started facing these trials and tribulations. And my husband went out, and the area was very, very rough, very rugged. They had a few roads back there, but they were just starting to build them. So they were very, very rough, and our truck was constantly breaking down. God spoke to somebody's heart right before we left, the day we left, and they gave us the keys to a brand new truck. That was one of the provisions God made for us. We had people laughing in our face saying, "How do you think you're going to go?" My husband said, "I'm going. If I have to put my wife and my boxes in a wheelbarrow and push them down, then I'm going." He said, "God called me, and I'm going." And so the day before we left, God provided this truck. But it was constantly breaking down. My husband was having to walk a lot. He would come home, his feet would be bleeding. And there were many people out there that hated him. The gospel had never been there before. They felt it was a threat to them. There's a lot of witchcraft out there, and they were against him. And so when David would leave, he would be gone hours, sometimes days at a time, and God had me praying and fasting. And many, many, many times, his life was on the line. I'm sure that many of you have heard his tapes and things. He told a little bit of this. But Satan tried to kill him over and over and over. He was shot off a horse one time, came in all bleeding, and God helped me to patch it back together. He got hit right here, which, a fraction either way, it would have killed him. It would have went right through him, but it hit this bone and glanced off. And God came in and supernaturally healed him. We've had, thousands of people have been saved, have come to the Lord. Thousands have been healed. We've had lame healed. We've had crippled healed. We've had diseased people healed. We've had blinded eyes open. Just about anything you can think of, we've had this happen. But we've also had many battles in the midst of it. Our home, we've had to pray the peace of God over our home, over our children. We've had to pray God's safety and protection daily. Each one of our children have been hit with serious diseases that you would never even hear of in the States. And, of course, most of the time, David would go out and pray for somebody, they'd get a miraculous healing, and one of our children come down with it at home. So we know it's a demonic thing. We knew what it was. But because of prayer and fasting and being in God's will, the safest place you can be, the safest place you can put your children is in God's will. There's going to be battles. There's going to be wars. But God will bring you through it. If you're in His will. Stay in God's will. It doesn't matter how hard it seems. I had one of the greatest days in the ministry there. We received paperwork in Mexico City which was going to legalize everything in the ministry. And we had actually been deported before for preaching the gospel. There was no other reason, just preaching the gospel. And they escorted us to the border and said, "Please don't ever come back to our country." And we went back anyway because God said. And this day, we had fought for years and years to get these papers to legalize what we were doing, that we could go in there and we had to do it because people were getting put in jail constantly for preaching the gospel there. And so we had to do this in order to stop them from putting our people in jail. And so this day, my husband was going to Mexico City to pick up this paper. He was so excited. He had our 10 national leaders with him, and it was a day of rejoicing. Well, this day, I was back home, tending the kids, teaching school, doing the things that need to be done in a home. And right at the same time David was receiving these papers, a stove blew up on me. It lit me on fire from the waist up, burned all my hair off, melted my fingernails, burnt my face off. I looked like a monster. My arms were burned from the fingernails up to the shoulders, and David wasn't there. And I called out to God for deliverance. I went through much pain, much torment. For 10 days, I laid wondering, am I going to be scarred for life? Am I ever going to be able to use my hands? David did come back the next day. He made it back. And he and the elders prayed over me. But I went through torment. I didn't get an instant healing. But we were believing God, praying, asking God to heal. And I knew He would heal my body. But I wasn't sure about the scars. I look in the mirror every day and I'd wonder, what am I going to look like when this is all healed and over? And the 10th day, David came in and he rubbed my forehead like this. And just like he did every day, just praying for me and touching my forehead. And when he did, the burned skin came off. And there was new skin underneath with no scars. So he started rubbing my whole face. And within a few minutes, I had a brand new face. God is faithful. His grace is sufficient. He will supply all you need. It took a few more days for my arms to get healed, but I have no scars. I should have in the natural, but because of God, I have right here one small scar. That's the hand I was holding the match in. But why it's there, I don't know, but I thank God for that. I thank God for that deliverance. He's very, very faithful. He's faithful in our homes. He's faithful in our work. He's touched each one of our children. We have 2 grown children. Our son is 27, and we have grandchildren, our grandson also that will be 2 in November. And I have a daughter that's 23, and she and her husband work with us. She's blessed with a wonderful husband. Her husband's there after his dad was killed in our work. He's one of the martyrs that my husband talked about last night. And God blessed us with him. He's part of our family. A very faithful young man. We have a wonderful daughter-in-law. Our son is married to, and they are in Mexico right now. They work with us all the time. Very much a blessing. This is the children that I wondered when we first went to Mexico what God would do with them, how we would raise them, how He would provide their needs. He provided their needs, and not only that, He gave them back to us after they were grown. And they worked right along beside us. We're very, very honored by that. God has blessed us so much. He's given us so much. He's been faithful. He's supplied every need. I even one time asked God, we didn't have any extra money. Once I asked God, didn't even ask God. I was just thinking one time how nice it would be to have barrettes for my little girl's hair. And in the mail came a package this long, every color that you would even think of. And it was barrettes. And, it could have been candy for the kids or just anything, but it was exactly what I was thinking would be a nice thing to have. One time, when our oldest daughter was a baby, we ran out of milk while we were at language school. We were on the Texas-Mexican border learning language. And it was the first time we were moved away from family and friends that, you can go and get a cup of milk from somebody. Usually even a neighbor you don't even know will give you milk for your baby. But we were trusting God, and we had everything else we needed, but we ran out of milk, and I needed to make Crystal a bottle. And so we just didn't know what was going to happen, so we just prayed that God will provide. And that day in the mail, a letter came, but we thought it was just a letter, so we just laid it aside and was a little bit disappointed because money sometimes comes through the mail, and that obviously wasn't there. Then after a little bit, we decided to read the letter. We picked up the letter and read it, and it was a nice little letter from a little lady. And inside the letter was 2 $1 bills. She said, I'm really embarrassed to say this. It's only $2, but maybe it'll buy your baby some milk.
All right.
And that, you know, I mean, God has done this over and over and over. He has been so faithful. So faithful. There's been times where my husband's been out where there's no communication. Been out and in a very, very dangerous life and death situation, and God speaks to my heart right then to just stop what I'm doing and pray for him, for his deliverance. And then when I would see him the next time, I would ask him, what happened at this time? And he would tell me what happened. And he knew that I knew because the timing was perfect. It was the right time. And it takes obedience. Obedience is better than sacrifice, is what the Bible tells us. That's what God has put in me, to be obedient. Just to be obedient. It doesn't matter who you are or what God's called you to do. Everybody can't be a pastor. Everybody can't be a leader. But God's got you where you are for a purpose. He wants us to be who we are, and He wants us to just be obedient to Him. Some people are great witnesses. Some people are great Bible teachers. I don't consider myself a Bible teacher, but I have Jesus. God's shown me some things. He's taught me some things. And I'm just a reporter. And I'm just reporting some things that God has done. And I just hope it'll encourage some of you to just do the little things. They may mean big things. It may mean somebody getting a bottle of milk for their baby. You know, it may seem insignificant, unimportant, nothing to you, but it is. It's important. It's little things that add up to big things. God has used me to stand behind my husband more than anything. That's my greatest desire. My desire in life is to be the best wife there ever was. And I work at it very hard. I try very hard. Sometimes it's difficult for a woman to serve her husband when he's ungrateful or doesn't act just like she thinks he should. I had a hard time with that. But I read in the Bible to do all that you do as unto the Lord. And I thought the times that it's difficult, if I can do it as unto the Lord, then I'll give it my best. And then it'll work. I believe that's one reason we're still where we are today. There's been plenty of opportunities to quit. We've had many, many, many disappointments, many battles, many trials. But God has put us together. We're a team. We work together. David does most of the ministry. I go out with him. I go in the jungle. We live in a jungle area. It's very hot. We work with Indians that are very, very poor. We eat many, many strange foods. We take our children with us. Even our grandson goes with us. And God takes care of us. It's not always easy. You know, you think if God, or some people think, if God's in it, then it's going to be easy, everything will work out. Well, just like last night when the electricity went off, it doesn't always work the way we think it should work. I think God was in the meeting last night, but the electricity still went off. So, you know, don't always look at the battles as, well, you know, we better stop. This is getting a little bit difficult. David and I have a belief that if there's not a battle going on, we must be going in the wrong direction. Right. We need to stop and think, because anytime God's done mighty things in this ministry, there's been mighty battles and many battles, many small battles and big battles. People turn against you. People quit. People hate you. You know, friends that you think would be there forever quit on you. But that doesn't mean God did. And so it's important to just be obedient to God. Do what God wants. In little things and big things. You know, somebody has to vacuum the carpet. That doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean that there's not a reward in heaven for the souls that are brought in. I believe that with all my heart, that if I serve my husband and I serve the ministry that we're in as unto the Lord, that whatever benefits are in that I'm receiving part of it. If I do it with joyfulness, thanksgiving in my heart, obedience to the Lord, then I've got a part in it also. And if you think of it that way, then you'll work harder, you'll do more, you'll do your job more. Some people think, if you're not up here on this platform, then you're not important, you're not doing things, but you are. You are. It's important to do it. It's important to be the ushers, the greeters, the Bible teachers, the nursery workers. Everything that you do works together as a body, and it helps. And that's why I want to be the best wife in the world. It's not only a help to the ministry, a help to my husband, it's a witness to the world. My husband and I have been married 28 years, and that's a testimony. In all natural sense, we should have failed in the first 5. And if God hadn't intervened, we would have. But God did. He's faithful, and I appreciate it. I think through all the dead raisings, through everything that I've personally seen in the ministry, the greatest miracle I've seen is when God saved my husband. When He saved him, and He put his feet on a path, and He's kept him there. And that, to me, has been the most wonderful, awesome thing. He completely changed his heart, changed his life, and through that, changed our lives, changed our destination. And I thank God that He's allowed me to be who I am, and He's placed us in the place where we are. We've done a lot of traveling in the past few months, but it would be easier for us to be in the jungles of Mexico. That's where our heart is. That's where God placed us. That's our people. And we love it. We love every minute of it. We love all the hard. We love all the good too. But God's put us there, and we want to stay there. We feel like we'll be there forever. But He's also brought us out to share a few things that He's done with these people, with other people, so that they can be encouraged to go out and to do more and to believe God for more. Many people ask, why isn't this happening in our area, in our country? Why are these miracles not happening? These Indians have no other choice. It's a blessing to us that we have so many things, but it's also a curse. The Indians have no other choice. They cannot afford to go to a doctor. If they go to a witch doctor, it costs them, they've had to sell the roof off their houses to pay for these things. And it's a temporary thing, because they want, the witch doctors and healers there, they want to have them keep coming back so they can keep getting money and keep getting money. So it's a temporary thing that they have to keep paying and keep paying. And so without Jesus, they don't have anything. And so when we come in and we pray and God heals them, sometimes they're a little bit, at the beginning, they're a little bit afraid to even tell us that they got healed, because there may be a charge. But, little by little they find out that God paid the price. Yes. With Jesus, His Son. It wasn't us. We don't want a price. It's been paid. Yes. God paid it. But there's great need there, and God is faithful to meet these needs. And He's using these miracles to reach these people. He can use those miracles here too. But we've got to quit being so self-sufficient. And how many of us, when we get to a point that the doctor can't do it, that we can't do it ourselves, then we'll call on God. But we need to start calling on God before it gets to a desperate situation. We went to a professional ball game recently, and those guys didn't wait till the main game to get out there and practice, to get out there and work out and get ready. They were ready when they got on the field. And so we need to start getting ready, you know. There's a lot of talk right now about the Y2K. There's a lot of fear being put in man's heart, and I don't know what it's all about. I really don't care. I know that God's grace is sufficient. Yes. My God will supply all my needs according to His riches and glory by Christ Jesus. And, you know, if we have our hearts right with God, if we're prepared, if we're ready, if we've prayed, if we've fasted, if we're being obedient, we don't have to worry about these things. God will provide the way. He may want you to store up a few cans of food, but He'll tell you what to put and what not to put in your cupboard at different times. We've had in Mexico before. God had us, different people at different times had brought in canned goods, truckloads of canned goods when they would come on a trip, and there's times where we would bring it in, and there's been times where we literally were shut off from the world down there because of flash floods and hurricanes, and shut off for weeks. And because of the storage that we had in our house that God provided, we were able not only to sustain our family, but to sustain a lot of other families also with food. And, you know, God prepared that. It wasn't a fear that we had. It wasn't a thing that, oh my God, you know, something might happen. We've got to do this. It was just a thing where God provided the food. It was in excess, and we had it. And then the storm came, and it was there, and the need was met. And I just believe that, you know, if our hearts are right and we're praying, seeking God every day, fasting on a regular basis, God will prepare you for what's to come. He'll prepare your heart. Fasting is a very, very important part of our lives. We fast continually. We pray continually, but we fast continually, and I say that because we have a calendar that we schedule. You know, we put you on the schedule. We put fasting on the schedule. Sometimes it's by the month, sometimes it's by the week. We fast different ways, not to get monotonous or religious about it. We fast every other day sometimes. Sometimes we fast one meal a day for a certain length of time. Sometimes we fast straight for 2-3 weeks. But it's important to do. When I started fasting, God spoke to my heart to pray and fast for my husband's life and for our family's life. And when I started fasting, I thought I would starve to death if I went a day without a meal. I really thought that I couldn't survive without food. But because God said do it and I wanted to be obedient, I went one day, one meal. I made that fine. So the next time I went 2 meals. Made that fine, felt good about it. God blessed it. So I thought, well, if I can do that, I can go all day without a meal. I went all day. And then after I did that a few times, I realized, hey, I could go 2 days. I fasted 2 days. And little by little, I worked it up to where I could fast 2-3 weeks at a time. And each time, there's different reasons for it. You know, I don't just do it just to starve myself to death. I do it because there's reasons, there's needs around me, there's needs in my family. And also, there's needs that I know are going to come up that we need to be prepared for. And so, fasting has become as much a part of our life as eating has. And it's important. If you want to see change in your own life, it may not change things around you. Some people think, well, you know, everything will be all perfect if I fast. Well, it's going to be a battle. You're going to have another battle, and it's going to come, but when you come through it, you're going to be stronger. You're going to be much stronger. So, I would encourage you to fast. And people ask me, because they hear that I've fasted a lot for many years, they ask me, well, how do you go about doing it? Well, I suggest that you do it in a way that you can do it. Set a goal that's possible. Because if you set something that's impossible, then you'll quit. You may never do it again. So set it that's possible. And do it. And see the results. And then you'll want to try it again. And it's addictive. You'll get addicted to it. You'll find out that it's very, very good for you. It's not a thing to fear or be afraid of. It's a blessing. It's good for you. And prayer, there's not enough time in the day to pray. Nobody has enough time to pray and read their Bible. I didn't have Bible training. I didn't know the simple Bible stories that children learn in Bible school and Sunday school. And I felt very inferior. I needed to have it, but I was in a country where work is a little bit more difficult in the house. I was teaching my own children at home. The houses are not air conditioned, so the floors that got swept and mopped in the morning needed again in the afternoon. And just everything seemed like it was a little bit more difficult. The shopping, you didn't go down to the grocery store and shop with a shopping cart. You went to the open market and carried things in your own bag that you bought to put it in. And you carried it home. And the work was a little bit more time consuming, a little bit harder. And I just was having a hard time finding time to study God's Word, to pray. And God said, well, I guess you just need to get up a little bit earlier. Well, we were already going to bed at midnight or after and getting up, before daylight. And so I did this like I did this fasting. I started getting up 15 minutes before my family. I thought if I could just get 15 minutes and have 15 minutes to myself, it'll be more than I can get in with an hour with the family up. And so I started getting up 15 minutes early, and I started enjoying it so much that I changed it to 30 minutes. And then I changed it to an hour. And I guess my family saw a difference because they started getting up earlier. And so that made me have to get up earlier. And but it brought me through these situations. It gave me a time to get to know Jesus and for Him to get to know me. And so if you don't have time to read the Bible and pray, set your clock 15 minutes earlier. And I promise you'll start getting earlier and earlier. And God will bring you through situations that you never even dreamed you would go through. Each one of our children have been at death's bed. We had a time in our lives where for 2 years we had a non-stop battle. This has been probably 6 or 7 years ago. And even my husband, he almost died. Our little 10-year-old son that we have, he literally died in my arms. We had an off day and gone to the beach just to have fun. And everything went well. We went swimming and we decided to come in. We had a little room rented and there was a little restaurant there on the beach. And we went and were waiting for our food to be brought to the table. And I noticed that our son he looked like he was cold. And so I just picked him up and put him in my arms to warm him up. And his eyes looked a little glassy, so I thought, well, maybe he's not feeling too good. And I looked at David and told him, my son didn't know Spanish at the time, so I told David in Spanish, because sometimes if you tell somebody else that your child don't feel good, and they hear you, but all of a sudden they don't feel good. And I didn't want that to happen, and I told him, I think he's not feeling well. And I no sooner got the words out of my mouth than our son went into convulsions and stopped breathing right in my arms. And there's not time to go and pray and fast and seek God when this happens. We jumped up, ran to our room, and started praying for him. Started asking God to bring him back. Begging, pleading, crying, praying, whatever. And we just kept doing it. And when stuff like this happens, it seemed like a little while. But God brought him back. He brought him back. He started breathing again. And we thought it was, 15, 20 minutes. Hours had gone by. And we looked at our clock. Hours had gone by. But God brought him back. And when he came back, he wasn't completely healed when he came back. He couldn't hear or see. And so we kept praying. And after a little period of time, he got everything back. And he's been completely healed since then. But again, there's not time to go and pray and fast and seek God and say, oh, I wish I'd have been doing this or doing that, or not doing this or not doing that. You got to be ready for these things when they happen. And if you're ready, God's ready. He'll be ready. He'll be there. He'll meet your needs. Another time, he and our daughter that's with me right now got scarlet fever, which is pretty serious. And they went through 10 days of misery. They had fever. They couldn't eat. My son's glands were just swollen, almost bigger than his head. And we weren't sure. It was her first and then the son. We weren't sure what was going on, what was happening. But God supernaturally healed them. He healed them completely. And then our daughter, our older daughter, we went through a trial with her right after these two were sick, and we thought she probably had the same thing. And except her symptoms were a little bit more severe, and we just assumed because she was older that maybe it was a little bit harder. But it wasn't the same thing. And she went through 21 days of just going downhill. And we would have a short period of time where we think she was going to pull out of it, get a little bit better, and then she would get worse. And she ended up in intensive care where they were telling us she could stop breathing in a minute. She had 2/3 of one lung blocked off, and the other lung was completely gone. So she was breathing with 1/3 of one lung. And they said the exhaustion from trying to get enough oxygen from only that much lung could kill it, on its own. Not to mention they didn't know what was wrong with her. They tested her for every deadly disease you can think of. From cancer, leukemia, you name it. Everything they said to us was deadly. And they tested her, and everything came back negative. And they didn't know what to do for her. So it was just the grace of God keeping her alive. And my husband, every time they would tell him they thought they knew what it was, they were going to put a test to it and see if that was it. He'd say, okay, go ahead, but it's going to come back negative. And it did, and that was okay. That was great. But they still didn't know how to treat her. And so one day, David walked in her room and he said, I think she's doing a little better. And I went in and looked at her. I said, she's not doing any better. I'm a mother. I can tell. I said, when she smiles, I'll know she's doing better. I said, my daughter's a happy daughter and she smiles all the time. And I haven't seen her smile in almost a month. When she smiles, I'll know she's doing better. And so another day or two went by, and he went in the room and he came out and he said, you got your smile. And I walked in and she was smiling. But when he walked in the room, he had to put on one of those white gowns that you have to put on when you go in and fix his hair. He was putting the robe on, and he saw physical healing go in our daughter. I don't know what it looked like to him, but he saw it. And it went right into our daughter. And the instant that it did, all the machines that were connected to her body did what they were supposed to do. All the nurses ran over. That day she was released from intensive care. And the doctor himself, who was not even a Christian, said to Crystal, our daughter, he said, we had nothing to do with your healing. We didn't know what was wrong. We knew you were supposed to die. We didn't know how to fix it. But we saw your dad out in the halls of this hospital praying, and it was his faith in his God that healed you. And it's his faith in his God that's brought us through. And it's faith in God that's brought us through all these things. It's faith in God, obedience to God more than anything. Just obedient. We're not anything special. We came out of Bastrop, Louisiana. It's a nothing place. Nobody knows where that place is unless you're from somewhere close by. We're nothing special. The things that God has done in Mexico through us, He can do through any of you. All you have to do is be obedient. Just be obedient. God can do it. He will do it. He will do it. He'll meet the need. That's my husband's desire when we went there was to see the dead raised. He wanted to see it. That was just one of his biggest desires, to see the dead raised. God gave him an opportunity to see the dead raised. He went out. We lived in this little town, and these teenage boys would come and sit in my husband's office while he prayed. He had some Christian comics that were in Spanish. And they just liked to be in that atmosphere. And they would come and sit in his office and just sit in the peace of God. And one day they came running to him. One of their little friends had drowned in the river. And they asked David, they just wanted him to know. And so David ran down to the river with them. And he said there were 1,000 people on the bank and 2 people in the water. The rivers were high. It was very, very dangerous. But this little boy was drowned out there. And 1,000 people on the bank and 2 in the river. And so David didn't think a thing about it. He just dove in. And he went in and he helped pull this little boy out. And he had been there under for a long time. And he was dead. And God spoke to my husband's heart to pray for him. He said, pray for him, I'll raise him up. David looked at the people on the bank and he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. That killed David. He quit that day. He went in his office and quit. And he stayed in that office, I don't know, it seemed like days. And he just couldn't do anything else. God gave him his desire. And he didn't obey because of the people. And so I don't much remember this, but David tells the story that I came up and said, either you get out there with those Indians where you belong, or let's go home. I don't want to just live here in the discomfort of Mexico for no reason. And he said that shook him to get up and go. And he started praying that day, asking God's forgiveness. He said, if you ever give me another chance, I don't care who's there. I don't care what's happening. And a period of time went by before God gave him another chance. But he went to a village one day, and there was a little boy there that had just died just several hours before. And they wanted David to pray for him. David went in and he prayed for this little boy. And he prayed and he prayed and he prayed. And after a period of time, he felt a thump right in his heart. And the boy's heart started beating. And that changed my husband's life. It changed our lives. And from that point on, he prayed for just about anything dead that he said. And God's grace, he himself has seen 21 people raised from the dead. And there's been several hundred raised from the dead in the ministry because he's taught our Indian leaders to raise the dead. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out devils. As freely we receive, as freely we give. But, just sharing these things with you, hoping to encourage you that, sometimes you see people that God's doing things with, you think they were just born that way. You think God just, put them out there and everything's all perfect. It's not that way at all. It's a day-to-day experience. It's a minute-by-minute experience. It's something that you choose to do, you decide to do. And I just want to encourage you to be obedient to God. His grace is sufficient. And I just want to encourage you to be obedient to God. His grace is sufficient. And I just want to encourage you to be obedient to God. His grace is sufficient. And I just want to encourage you to be obedient to God.